The air hung thick with copper and sulfur on Cythera Prime, where the arena's obsidian stones absorbed heat like hungry mouths. Queen Nyla, the Silver Death, stood at the apex of her viewing platform, her mercury-hued armor reflecting the harsh light of 3 suns that beat down upon the Colosseum. Below her, 100,000 spectators roared, their faces painted in the ritual markings of bloodlust, the sound of their collective anticipation thundering against the volcanic walls that encircled this ancient place of judgment. "Bring forth the human," she commanded, her voice carrying without effort across the hushed arena. 2 guards dragged forward a man whose simple Earth diplomatic uniform seemed pathetically inadequate against the blistering heat. His wrists bore silver shackles that gleamed almost as brightly as Nyla's infamous armor. Unlike the 99 challengers who had preceded him, however, this man, Brody Kane, Earth's special envoy, did not struggle against his bonds. His eyes, a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin, studied everything with methodical precision, the crowd's movements, the guards' formation, and most particularly, the Queen herself. "Human diplomat," Nyla addressed him, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of ritual. "You stand before me as the 100th challenger. 99 warriors have fallen to my blade this season. Their blood has consecrated this sand." She gestured to the rusty hue of the arena floor. "Do you understand the honor of being the ceremonial final sacrifice?" The crowd fell into expectant silence. By tradition, the condemned would now beg, threaten, or posture, all futile preludes to their execution. But Brody did something no one in the arena had anticipated. He smiled. "Queen Nyla," he said, his voice carrying with surprising strength. "I notice your left pauldron has a slight gap at the joint. An assassin's needle could find purchase there." He tilted his head thoughtfully. "And your stance favors your right leg. Perhaps an old injury. If I were to fight you, I'd exploit that." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Captain Zara, Nyla's second-in-command, stepped forward, laser pike raised. "Silence! You dare analyze the Silver Death?" But Nyla raised her hand, halting Zara's advance. For the first time in years, genuine curiosity flickered behind her violet eyes. "You face certain death," she said, "yet you speak as though observing a training match." Brody shrugged, the chains clinking softly. "I was sent to understand you, Your Majesty. Whether I die or not, I intend to fulfill that mission." Nyla descended from her platform in 3 graceful leaps, landing on the sand with barely a sound despite her armor. The crowd roared their approval. The Queen herself would execute this insolent human. She circled him slowly, her ceremonial blade unsheathed. "Understanding requires life," she said, bringing the edge of her weapon to his throat. "And you have precious little of that remaining." "Perhaps," Brody replied, his pulse visibly steady against the blade. "But I suspect you've grown tired of killing those who don't understand you at all." The silence that followed his words seemed to stretch across the vastness of space itself. The entire arena held its breath. Nyla's eyes narrowed, something unreadable flickering across her features. Then, with a motion so swift it seemed like silver lightning, she slashed. The chains binding Brody's wrists. The metal links clattered to the sand. The crowd murmured in confusion. "Take him to the questioning chambers," Nyla commanded. "This one's death will not be so immediate." As the guards led Brody away, the disappointed crowd began a low, discontented rumble. Nyla turned to them, raising her blade. "The Festival of Strength continues tomorrow," she declared. "Today, we have found a different kind of worthy opponent, one of mind rather than muscle." The spectators, programmed to respond to their queen's will, erupted in a manufactured cheer, even as confusion rippled beneath their enthusiasm. In the royal viewing box, General Vex's expression darkened, his scarred face contorting with barely concealed fury. Beside him, Elder Kale stroked his ceremonial beard, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "The human should have died like the others," Vex muttered. "Patience," Elder Kale replied. "The Queen's curiosity has always been her weakness. It will serve us yet." In the shadowed corridor leading away from the arena, Brody caught Captain Zara studying him with open hostility. "If you harm her," Zara began. "I have no intention of harming anyone," Brody interrupted. "Quite the opposite, actually." Zara snorted in disbelief. "All off-worlders want something from Cythera. Our minerals, our battle technology, our strategic position. Perhaps what I want," Brody said carefully, "is for fewer people to die needlessly." The questioning chamber turned out to be an unexpected surprise. Rather than the torture dungeon Brody had anticipated, he found himself in a spacious room with panoramic windows overlooking the capital city's gleaming spires. The walls were adorned with delicate silk hangings depicting famous battles, and a table of rare hardwood dominated the center, laden with exotic fruits and steaming beverages. When Queen Nyla entered, she had removed her helmet, revealing a face of striking beauty. High cheekbones, violet eyes, and silver-white hair cropped short in the warrior fashion. Without her armor, she was still imposing. Her body lithe and powerful in a simple black garment that resembled a form-fitting training uniform. "You're surprised," she observed, gesturing for him to sit. "I expected something less comfortable," Brody admitted, choosing a chair that allowed him to keep the door in view. "Pain rarely extracts truth," Nyla said, pouring a deep red liquid into 2 goblets. "It merely encourages creative lying." She pushed one goblet toward him. "Mendaxian wine, not poisoned, I assure you." Brody accepted the drink but didn't taste it. "An unusual philosophy for the Silver Death." "Death in the arena is quick and honorable," she replied. "Pain for its own sake lacks purpose." "Yet you've executed 99 challengers this season alone." "They challenged me," she said simply. "Our laws demand it." "And if the laws were different?" Nyla's eyes flashed. "The laws have kept our people strong for 10 generations. We rule because we are strongest. We survive because we do not tolerate weakness." Brody leaned forward. "Yet you spared me, objectively the weakest challenger you've faced." "You are not weak," she countered. "Your strength is simply unconventional." "As could be yours," Brody suggested. "Strength through mercy rather than fear." Nyla laughed, a sound surprisingly melodic from such a feared warrior. "You speak of mercy as though it isn't the ultimate weakness." "Tell me," Brody asked, finally sipping the wine, which burned pleasantly down his throat. "Do your people love you, or merely fear you?" The question seemed to strike some hidden chord. For a moment, genuine uncertainty crossed Nyla's face. "Love is irrelevant to ruling," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" Brody pressed. "If your subjects loved you, would General Vex find so many willing ears for his whispers of rebellion?" Nyla's hand moved to her blade with lightning speed. "What do you know of Vex?" "I observe," Brody said calmly, despite the weapon now inches from his face. "The way he looked at you in the arena, the faction symbols worn by those seated near him, the communications device he conceals in his ceremonial gauntlet." He smiled slightly. "I told you, understanding is my mission." Nyla lowered her weapon slowly. "And is betraying my enemies part of that mission?" "My mission," Brody said carefully, "is to establish whether Cythera Prime would make a better ally or enemy to Earth. Currently, you extract protection payments from 17 human colonies, while giving little in return. The Terran Council sent me to reassess that arrangement." "By becoming my 100th kill?" Nyla scoffed. "By understanding what drives you," Brody corrected. "Fear can create vassals, Your Majesty, but only mutual respect creates allies." For hours, they spoke of galactic politics, of Earth's growing influence, of the resources Cythera possessed and the protection it required. As darkness fell across the capital, Their conversation shifted to the economic pressures facing the Queen's rule. The mineral shortages, the growing unrest in the outer settlements, the whispers of revolution. "Your military might is unquestioned," Brody observed, as servants lit floating illumination orbs around the chamber. "But your economy teeters on collapse. Your people hunger while your warriors feast." Nyla paced the room, her earlier composure fracturing. "What would you have me do? Show weakness before my generals? They circle like predators, waiting for any sign of vulnerability." "There's a difference between vulnerability and evolution," Brody said. "Earth faced similar challenges centuries ago. We adapted." "And became soft," Nyla countered. "We became strong in different ways," Brody corrected. "Our diversity became our strength. Our compassion became our shield." Nyla stopped before the largest window, gazing out at her capital. Pretty words from a world that has never faced the Krell invasions or the Void Plagues. "No," Brody acknowledged, moving to stand beside her. "Our challenges were different, but the principle remains. Adaptation ensures survival far better than rigid adherence to tradition." For a moment, they stood in silence, shoulders nearly touching, as they watched the 3 moons of Cythera rise over the jagged skyline. "Return to your quarters," Nyla said abruptly. "We will continue tomorrow." As guards escorted Brody to a surprisingly luxurious chamber, he caught sight of General Vex watching from the shadows, his expression murderous. Brody smiled pleasantly at him, noting how the general's hand instinctively moved to his concealed communication device. "Sleep well, human," Vex sneered. "Enjoy the Queen's hospitality while it lasts." "I intend to," Brody replied cheerfully. "Though I must say, your encryption protocols need work. That device in your gauntlet broadcasts on a frequency our children's toys abandoned decades ago." He took immense satisfaction in the flash of panic that crossed Vex's face before the general mastered himself and stormed away. In his chambers, Brody finally activated his subdermal communicator once he'd confirmed there were no surveillance devices. "Kane reporting," he whispered. "Phase 1 complete. The Queen is not what we expected." "Elaborate," came the terse reply from his handler back on Earth. "She's intelligent, adaptable, trapped in a system she didn't create but must maintain to survive. The real threat is her generals, particularly Vex." "Your mission remains unchanged," the handler reminded him. "Neutralize the Cytheran threat by any means necessary." Brody hesitated. "Understood," he said finally. "Kane out." He deactivated the communicator and stared out at the alien moons, troubled by the hollow feeling in his chest. For the first time in his career as a diplomatic operative, the mission parameters felt wrong. Days stretched into weeks. Each morning, Brody would join Queen Nyla, first in the questioning chamber, then in her private strategy room, and eventually in her personal training arena. He observed her combat forms, offering occasional suggestions that she initially dismissed, but gradually came to consider. In return, she taught him the ritual movements of Cytheran blade combat, laughing openly when he stumbled, but nodding with approval when he mastered a particularly difficult sequence. Their discussions ranged from immediate tactical concerns, Vex's growing faction, the resource allocation crisis in the Southern Hemisphere, to philosophical debates about strength, leadership, and the nature of power. Gradually, the formality between them dissolved into something resembling camaraderie. "Your form improves," Nyla noted one morning as they completed a training sequence, her silver practice blade stopping just short of his throat. "But you still hesitate before the killing strike." "Perhaps because I see alternatives to killing," Brody replied, using a technique she hadn't taught him to slip past her guard, reversing their positions. Nyla's eyes widened with surprise, then narrowed with appreciation. "Where did you learn that move?" "I observed General Vex training his elite guard," Brody admitted. "His technique reveals much about his character: aggressive, impatient, prone to overextension. Nyla stepped back, studying him with new interest. You've been gathering intelligence on my enemies. Knowledge is survival, Brody said, echoing one of her frequent assertions. That evening, for the first time, Nyla dismissed her personal guards and servants, sharing a private meal with Brody in her inner sanctum. The room was surprisingly austere for a monarch, functional rather than opulent, with weapons displayed as tools rather than decorations. Tell me of Earth, she requested, refilling his goblet herself instead of summoning a servant. Not the diplomatic version, the truth. Brody considered her request. Earth is complicated, beautiful and flawed. We nearly destroyed ourselves numerous times before learning that cooperation yields greater rewards than competition. Yet you maintain military forces. We do, Brody acknowledged. The universe remains dangerous, but our greatest strength lies in our alliances, genuine partnerships, rather than subjugation. Nyla set down her goblet, studying him intently. And is that what you offer, Cythera? Partnership? It could be, Brody said carefully, if certain changes were implemented. The ritual combats, Nyla surmised. Your people find them barbaric. My people, Brody said quietly, believe that leaders who must constantly prove their physical dominance rarely have time to develop other crucial skills. Diplomacy, economic strategy, scientific advancement. Nyla rose suddenly, turning away from him. You think me a simple butcher? No, Brody said firmly, standing as well. I think you're extraordinary. A brilliant tactical mind trapped in a system that reduces you to your blade arm. She turned back to him, something vulnerable and fierce in her expression. The system has kept our people alive through catastrophes that obliterated other civilizations. And now it's strangling you, Brody replied. You know this, Nyla. Your economic advisors have told you. Your scientists have warned you. Even your military strategists see the writing on the wall. Cythera cannot survive another decade on its current path. Then, what would you have me do? She demanded, her voice rising with rare emotion. Surrender everything my ancestors built? Evolve it, Brody said simply, daring to step closer. Show your people that the Silver Death can create as well as destroy. Their eyes locked, the tension between them shifting into something neither had anticipated. For a moment, it seemed as though Nyla might strike him, or perhaps something else entirely. Instead, she stepped back, composing herself with visible effort. It's late, she said. We'll continue tomorrow. But that night, alarms blared throughout the royal complex. Brody was jolted from sleep by Captain Zara bursting into his chambers. The Queen demands your presence, she said tersely. Immediately, Brody found Nyla in her war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing security breaches throughout the palace. Her expression was thunderous, her legendary composure fractured. 3 assassination attempts, she said without preamble, all bearing Vex's signature, yet with enough distance to maintain deniability. Casualties? Brody asked, immediately assessing the tactical displays. 4 of my personal guard, Nyla replied, grief momentarily visible beneath her rage. Loyal warriors who deserved better deaths than poison and cowards' blades. Brody studied the pattern of attacks. This was coordinated with external forces, he observed. The timing suggests a coup, Nyla finished. Vex moves earlier than I anticipated. But not earlier than we can counter, Brody said. He hesitated, then added, if you trust me. Nyla's violet eyes searched his face. Why would I trust an Earth operative sent to undermine my rule? Because, Brody said quietly, I've had 17 opportunities to kill you in the past month and have taken none of them. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. 14, she corrected. I was aware of your movements on 3 occasions you thought yourself unobserved. Despite the gravity of the situation, Brody found himself smiling back. Even more reason to trust me. I'm clearly not as clever as I think. Or perhaps, Nyla said, her voice softening momentarily, I've come to know you too well. The moment of vulnerability passed quickly. What do you propose? Through the remaining hours of darkness, they formulated their plan. By dawn, when the three sons of Cythera began their ascent, everything was in place. Queen Nyla called an emergency session of her full court, generals, elders, nobility, and merchant representatives. The grand hall filled with tense whispers and suspicious glances as factions identified each other in the crowd. General Vex arrived with a contingent of his personal guard, their hands never straying far from their weapons. My loyal subjects, Nyla began, her voice carrying effortlessly across the vast chamber. Last night, traitors struck at the heart of our sovereignty. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Vex's expression remained carefully neutral, though Brody, standing unobtrusively near a side entrance, noted the slight tension in the general's shoulders. For too long, Nyla continued, I have allowed whispers of discontent to go unchallenged. I believe that Cytherans deserve the freedom to question, to debate the future of our world. Her eyes hardened. That ends today. A current of unease swept through the gathering. Even Vex looked momentarily uncertain. Strength has always been the foundation of Cytheran rule, Nyla declared. Today, I will remind you all why I am the Silver Death. She raised her hand, and the great doors of the hall swung open. Two guards entered, dragging between them a battered figure that Brody recognized as one of Vex's most trusted lieutenants. The man had clearly been subjected to intensive interrogation. Commander Thax has provided interesting information about last night's attacks, Nyla announced. Information that traces directly to a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of our military. General Vex stepped forward, his scarred face contorted with righteous indignation. My queen, if there are traitors in our midst, I demand the right to execute them myself. How convenient, Nyla remarked coldly, that the architect of treason should volunteer to eliminate his own accomplices. The hall erupted in chaos. Vex's guards drew their weapons, while loyal soldiers moved to protect the queen. Elder Kale and his traditionalists began shouting accusations, while merchant representatives cowered behind pillars. Lies! Vex roared. Where is your proof? At that moment, Brody activated the holographic array he and Nyla had programmed hours earlier. Above the assembly, giant projections appeared. Vex meeting with known dissidents, transmitting secure data to off-world contacts, distributing untraceable weapons to his loyal faction. Your encryption, Brody called out, stepping into view, really was embarrassingly outdated. General. Vex's face drained of color, then flushed with fury. The human, he snarled. You've allowed an Earth spy to corrupt you, my queen. He is the true threat to Cythera. Earth has offered us partnership, Nyla replied calmly. You offered only betrayal? With a roar of rage, Vex drew his ceremonial blade and lunged, not at Nyla, but at Brody. Die, human manipulator! The general was fast, his blade a blur of deadly intent. But Brody had spent weeks studying Cytheran combat forms. He sidestepped with precision, using Vex's momentum against him, exactly as Nyla had taught him. The general stumbled forward, off balance and exposed. Before Vex could recover, Nyla's silver blade pressed against his throat. The penalty for treason, she said softly, is death. The hall held its breath. Brody watched Nyla's face, seeing the internal struggle between the queen she had been trained to be and the ruler she might become. However, she continued, surprising everyone, execution without understanding serves no purpose. She lowered her blade slightly. You will be imprisoned until a full tribunal can examine your crimes and motives. Justice will be served, but it will be justice tempered with wisdom. A shocked silence fell over the assembly. Then, from an unexpected quarter. Applause began, led by the merchant representatives, quickly joined by younger military officers and provincial delegates. Even some of the traditionalists, after a moment's hesitation, added their approval. As Vex was led away in chains, his face a mask of impotent rage, Elder Kale approached the throne, his ancient features unreadable. "This is not our way," he said quietly to Nyla. "Mercy to traitors weakens us all. Our way has brought us to the brink of civil war and economic collapse." Nyla replied, loud enough for nearby courtiers to hear. "Perhaps it is time to forge a new way, one that honors our strength while embracing new forms of power." Over the days that followed, Brody watched in fascination as Nyla implemented sweeping changes, establishing an advisory council that included not just military leaders, but scientists, economists, and cultural representatives, opening negotiations with Earth and other galactic powers, and most controversially, modifying the ritual combat traditions to serve as demonstrations of skill rather than fights to the death. Not all welcomed these changes. Twice more, assassins came for Nyla, and twice more, they failed, once stopped by her own blade, once by Brody's timely intervention. Each attempt only strengthened her resolve and, surprisingly, increased her popular support. The common people of Cythera, it seemed, had grown weary of constant bloodshed. One evening, as they stood on the palace's highest balcony, watching the triple sunset, Nyla turned to Brody with uncharacteristic hesitation. "Your mission must be nearly complete," she observed. "You've helped transform Cythera from Earth's adversary to its potential ally." Brody nodded slowly. "The Terran Council will be satisfied with the new trade agreements and mutual defense pacts." "And you?" Nyla asked, a vulnerability in her voice he'd rarely heard. "Will you be satisfied returning to Earth as the successful diplomat?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken possibilities. Brody thought of the encrypted orders still embedded in his subdermal communicator, contingency plans he'd never activated, strategies for manipulating Cythera into colonial dependency rather than true alliance. "I was sent here with two sets of orders," he admitted finally. "The public mission to establish diplomatic relations, and another objective." Nyla's expression hardened slightly. "I suspected as much. What was this other objective?" "To ensure Cythera would never again threaten Earth's interests," Brody said, "by any means necessary." "Including my death," Nyla surmised. "If required," Brody acknowledged. "Or by ensuring Cytheran dependency on Earth resources, creating an economic vassalage that would prevent any future military action against human worlds." Nyla turned away, her profile sharp against the crimson sky. "And now, what do your orders demand?" "My orders haven't changed," Brody said quietly. "But I have." He moved to stand beside her, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her body, but not daring to bridge the final distance between them. "I was sent to understand you," he continued. "I succeeded too well. I cannot betray what I've come to. Respect." Nyla turned to him, searching his face. "Respect," she repeated, the word carrying a weight of unspoken emotion. "Among other things," Brody admitted. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Then Nyla spoke, her voice firm with decision. "Remain on Cythera," she said. "Not as Earth's envoy, but as my royal advisor. Help me build this new way." The offer stunned him. "Your court would never accept an off-worlder in such a position." "They will accept what their queen demands," Nyla said with a flash of her old imperious manner. Then, more softly, "And perhaps, more than an advisor, in time." The implication was clear. Brody felt a rush of conflicting emotions, desire, certainly, but also doubt and the weight of his original mission. "I would be honored," he said carefully. "But there's something you should know first." He took a deep breath. "The trade agreements we've negotiated, There are clauses hidden in the technical appendices, provisions that would gradually increase Scythera's dependency on Earth technologies and resources. Nyla's expression darkened. You wrote these provisions. I did, Brody admitted. Before I knew you. Before I understood what Scythera could become. And now? She challenged. Now I'll help you remove them, he said firmly. If you'll still have me. Nyla studied him for a long moment, her violet eyes unreadable. Then, with deliberate movement, she reached out and took his hand, a gesture of intimacy that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. We will rewrite them together, she said, as equals. That night, Brody sent his final transmission to Earth, formally resigning his position and recommending a new diplomatic approach based on genuine partnership rather than manipulation. He knew there would be consequences, possibly even charges of treason, but as he severed the connection, he felt only certainty. In the months that followed, Scythera underwent a remarkable transformation. Under Nyla and Brody's joint guidance, the planet's rich mineral resources were redirected from purely military applications to technological development and improved living conditions. The ritual combats evolved into exhibitions of skill and honor, still central to Scytheran culture, but no longer demanding death as the price of tradition. Not all embraced these changes. Elder Kale and his traditionalists remained vocal critics, warning that Scythera was abandoning its heritage. Some military factions, loyal to Vex's vision, attempted localized rebellions. But with each challenge, Nyla demonstrated that mercy did not equal weakness, that true strength lay in knowing when to strike and when to spare. Most surprisingly, to both Nyla and Brody, their professional partnership gradually, inevitably, evolved into something deeper. Their first kiss came after jointly thwarting yet another assassination attempt, adrenaline and relief melting into something neither could deny any longer. Their formal union, months later, combined Earth and Scytheran traditions in a ceremony that symbolized the new path they were forging together. On the evening of their union celebration, as the 3 moons of Scythera rose over a capital city, now glittering with both ancient glory and new prosperity, they stood once again on the palace's highest balcony. Did you ever imagine, Brody asked, when you ordered my execution in the arena, that we would end up here? Nyla's laugh, once so rare, came easily now. Never, though I maintain I would have killed you efficiently. And I maintain, Brody countered with a smile, that I would have found a way to survive. Perhaps we were always destined to reach this impasse, Nyla mused, leaning against him. The queen who couldn't kill, and the diplomat who wouldn't die. Not an impasse, Brody corrected, wrapping his arm around her waist. A beginning. Below them, the city pulsed with new energy, ancient Scytheran structures now illuminated with Earth-inspired technologies. Streets, filled with a people no longer living under the shadow of constant combat. In the distance, the arena that had once run red with the blood of challengers now served as a center for cultural exchange and athletic competition. There will be more challenges, Nyla said, her tactical mind never fully at rest. Earth's council has accepted our independence for now, but some factions still wish to control Scythera's resources. And some of your generals still dream of conquest rather than cooperation. Brody acknowledged. We've changed the course of 2 civilizations. There will always be those who prefer the old ways. Then we will face them together, Nyla declared. The determination that had made her the Silver Death, now channeled into creation rather than destruction. Neither Earth's vassal nor its adversary, but its equal. Brody smiled, thinking of how far they had come from that first confrontation in the blood-soaked arena. From execution to alliance, not the diplomatic approach they taught at the academy. From battle queen to reformer, Nyla countered, not the path my ancestors envisioned. As the 3 sons of Scythera completed their descent, casting the world into a brief star-filled darkness before the moon's illumination took hold. Brody and Nyla sealed their commitment with a kiss that bridged worlds, a promise of strength through mercy, power through partnership, and love as the most transformative force in any galaxy. In the shadows of the palace corridors, Captain Zara, now head of the Queen's Reformed Guard, smiled slightly as she watched the royal couple. She remembered her initial suspicion of the human diplomat, her certainty that he represented a threat to everything Scytherin. Now, she could admit her error. Perhaps there was wisdom in the earth saying Brody had taught her. The strongest metal is formed when different elements are forged together. As for General Vex, his tribunal had resulted not in execution, as traditional law would have demanded, but in exile to Cythera's most distant mining colony. There, reports suggested, he was amassing a small but dedicated following of traditionalists. A problem for another day, perhaps. But for now, Sci-Fi Prime shone as a beacon of evolution in a galaxy accustomed to stagnation or conquest as the only options. And in the royal chambers that night, as Brody held the once-feared Silver Death in his arms, he reflected on the mission that had brought him to this volcanic world. He had been sent to understand Queen Nyla, to find her weaknesses, to neutralize the threat she posed. Instead, he had discovered her greatest strength, her capacity for growth, for change, for transformation. And in that discovery, he had found his own purpose, not as Earth's agent, or even as Cythera's advisor, but as partner to an extraordinary woman who had learned that the most powerful weapon in her arsenal was not her legendary blade, but her ability to show mercy when mercy was never expected. Together, they had rewritten the rules of power, proving that the most enduring strength comes not from fear, but from genuine alliance between worlds, between traditions, and between hearts that recognize in each other not an enemy to conquer, but a companion with whom to forge a better future. And as the triple moons of Cythera cast their silver light across the transformed world below, that future had never looked more promising.